Nearly 13,000 feet down, the Titanic is still there, and some doors still look locked by time itself. If the ship is a wreck, how can an entrance stay so tightly set, like nobody has passed through it since 1912? And why does this spot show up so inconsistently in records and maps? Today, we're going to follow those clues all the way to the door nobody was supposed to open. And if you want to track this investigation the right way, hit like and subscribe. In 1912, Titanic was the ultimate showcase of what a modern ocean liner could be: comfort, engineering, and a routine that seemed impossible to break. From the outside, the scale is overwhelming. A massive hull, 4 funnels, and a port operation that already feels like military logistics. Inside, the ship ran like a layered city: luxury spaces with electric light, polished wood, and silent service. And below that, a hot, loud, smoke-filled technical underworld. The point is, none of it was random. Every corridor had a purpose, every door had a reason. And when a ship depends this much on hierarchy and controlled access, certain doors become more than passageways. They become control. On board, every role came with a path and a boundary. A waiter didn't wander wherever they wanted. An engineer had no reason to stroll through grand salons. And the people in command worked to keep human traffic as predictable as possible. That isn't vanity. It's safety and efficiency inside a tight, crowded machine that never stops moving. Signs, locks, and service doors existed to reduce confusion and prevent unnecessary crossings. And here's the detail that stands out. When someone avoids a door without even trying it, it's usually not fear, it's policy. The question is simple and annoying. What kind of rule makes sense on a ship this big on its very first voyage? Now comes the part that gets fewer clicks and carries more truth. Ships this large changed up to the last minute. Blueprints could be adjusted, cabins reassigned, technical spaces subdivided, and that created multiple official versions of the same map. When you compare internal directories, deck plans, and written descriptions, small inconsistencies pop up. And by itself, that doesn't mean secret at all, but it does mean investigation, checking what matches, what doesn't, and why. Because Titanic was too big to be perfect on paper, and when a detail keeps reappearing with variations, it becomes a clue, not a conclusion. This is where the sealed cabin hypothesis is born, a space that seems to exist but doesn't show up clearly and consistently across everything you can consult. There's no reliable name attached to it, no obvious function spelled out. What's left is behavior and context, a section people seem to avoid, an entrance that stays closed, and an access pattern that doesn't match normal public areas. That could be simple discipline. The classic, not your area, keep moving. Or it could be a specific order. The kind nobody debates and nobody writes down where it's easy to find. And let's be honest, a closed door is exactly the kind of thing the human mind wants to solve by force. On the night of the disaster, the ship still feels like a machine running, but the world outside is already a warning. Biting cold, glass-calm water, and darkness that lies about distance. On the bridge, they work with the window open to nothing. Just night and sea, no easy reference points. Elsewhere, the contrast is eerie. Warm light, Carpet, people walking like it's just another evening. And that's how risk becomes efficient. Normal life inside hides what's coming. On a big ship, you don't see danger arriving. You feel it in small signals and only later understand the scale. When the iceberg contact happens, the shape of the damage is everything. Evidence points to a long scrape along the side, not a simple head-on crash. That changes the entire math, because a distributed tear can compromise multiple compartments in sequence. On the bridge, the response is technical and immediate. Course adjustment, checks, clipped orders. On deck, it registers as vibration and wrongness because it isn't a dramatic impact. It's heavy, continuous friction. It passes, and it leaves consequences. Below, the sound changes, and engineering starts doing the only question that matters: how much water, where, and how fast. Once water starts coming in, the ship becomes a containment problem. Watertight doors exist to buy time, but they don't erase damage. They only slow what can still be slowed. The engineering crew runs hot corridors, reads gauges, works valves, fights to keep power and pumps alive as long as possible. But water doesn't negotiate. It rises by level and by passage, and every minute gained costs muscle and coordination. And meanwhile, the interior begins to change shape. Frames warp, doors start to scrape, and a hallway that used to be simple becomes a barrier. It's the beginning of the ship redrawing its own map. As the situation becomes clear, the priority shifts to communication and controlled movement. The radio room goes into a frantic rhythm, and on board, the logistics begins that only seems obvious in hindsight. Life vests, routes, muster points, flow control. Officers and crew try to turn uncertainty into procedure, because procedure is what keeps panic from turning into a blockade. But Titanic is a vertical maze, full of corners and choke points. And as the ship slowly tilts, even climbing a staircase becomes a different kind of problem. In that scenario, any door that closes, any passage that jams, becomes a real factor, not a small detail. As the angle increases, accessibility starts to die. Some doors lock up from pressure and deformation, some stairways become traps, and entire corridors get claimed by water or debris. Now the question about the sealed space changes levels. It's no longer, why was it closed? It becomes, when did it become impossible to reach? Because in a disaster, rules turn into improvisation, unless the ship itself has already cut the access. And when the path vanishes, whatever is on the other side stops being a human choice. It becomes a physical consequence, and that helps explain why certain spaces could have remained isolated all the way to today. On deck, lifeboat work is pure technique under pressure. Release, adjust, control the swing, lower without losing stability. Inside, the crew focuses on doing the basics well. Direct people, gear them up, keep circulation moving, because bad improvisation creates jams and injuries. And have you noticed how, in a crisis, details become everything? One rope tied wrong, one gate latched badly, 1 minute wasted. Meanwhile, the ship keeps losing level. And every new tilt changes what can still be accessed. If you want to stay with me until the moment that door becomes the center of the investigation, hit like and subscribe, because from here on out, Titanic only loses options. From here, the operation becomes an ugly balance between discipline and improvisation. On deck, the lifeboat crews work with almost zero margin for error. Lines tight, turns controlled, no sudden jolts. Inside, normal life breaks in stages. Objects slide, doors begin to grind against frames, and the floor turns into a subtle ramp that only gets worse. The terrifying part is it's not always loud. Sometimes it's the ship still looking whole while control is failing underneath. And at this point, the hull starts deciding on its own which areas stay alive and which become dead ends. That's when a closed door stops being policy and becomes geography. When water reaches the lower levels, it doesn't arrive as a puddle. It arrives as an advance. The waterline pushes through corridors, climbs steps one by one, and forces a tilt that changes everything. Weight, friction, the behavior of doors and passageways. That's when the section tied to the suspicious space starts acting like isolation. Debris piles up, darkness takes over, and access narrows until it's not worth insisting. So the question becomes blunt. Was the closure an order or a collapse? In practice, what matters is the outcome. An area that may have been sealed not by a lock, but by structure failing at the wrong moment. This is where the ship stops offering choices. The tilt becomes law. Water becomes a moving wall, and the interior rearranges itself. Furniture slides, panels pop free, passages jam. In that chaos, the sealed access turns into a symbol. Not because someone is guarding something, but because collapse starts guarding it on its own. Have you noticed how the human brain keeps begging for one more step, even when the scene is screaming it's impossible? In reality, this is the moment the route closes. Whatever is on the other side begins to exist in a different mode, separated, protected by accident, and beyond any rational attempt at that moment. Decades later, silence returns on a different scale. Instead of footsteps and shouting, you get LED beams cutting through darkness, and a submersible robot descending on a tether controlled from a ship far above. Modern technology doesn't enter Titanic like an adventure. It tries to observe without touching, because contact can destroy what's left. Light sweeps across the hull and reveals layered corrosion, silt buildup, and openings that became entrances through collapse. And when the robot noses toward a corridor, the work shifts tempo. Micro adjustments, minimal thrust, safe distance. The investigation starts the right way. Slow, measured, recorded, not turning ruin into a show. The method here is almost surgical. The robot makes lateral passes, keeps a constant standoff, uses scale references and scan patterns to document geometry and detail. It isn't treasure hunting. It's archaeology under extreme conditions. And when the camera finds the right angle, the door shows up in the most frustrating way possible, not as proof of a secret, but as a physical limit. The area around it collapsed, access became a dead end, and the structure itself seems to have shielded a pocket from total crushing. That doesn't confirm what's inside, but it confirms there is an inside, still isolated. And down here, isolation is rare and valuable. The closer the light gets, the clearer the dilemma becomes. Whatever is standing is fragile. Rusticles snap easily, paint turns to dust, and silt blooms with a single burst from a thruster, wiping detail in seconds. That's why the robot works in retreats, micro-movements, narrow angles, trying to look through cracks without making contact. In places, the beam catches a gap beside a fallen beam and hints at enclosed space beyond the frame, but offers no safe access. It's that kind of moment where you can see something is there, and at the same time, you understand forcing it would destroy it. And right then, not opening stops being frustrating. It becomes the only professional choice. Archaeological logic is simple and brutal. Without context, an object is a curiosity. With context, it's evidence. Opening a door at this depth could shift sediment, destabilize a fragile frame, or collapse something that stayed intact by pure luck. So the method is to push what you can do safely, map the frame, measure the seam, document the collapse around it, compare it to other passages. And here comes the human part. Curiosity itches, right? But responsibility is knowing when to stop at the edge. Because on the seafloor, speed erases history, and erased history here is forever. To understand why this place stayed isolated, you have to return to the real motion of the sinking. Titanic went down by the bow. Weight pulled the front, water climbed level by level, and the ship lost horizontal balance. As the angle increased, the interior became a ramp and routes changed by force. Things slid, doors jammed, corridors stopped being corridors. The entire structure worked under tension, showing up as vibration, sharp cracks, and long metal groans. In plain terms, the ship didn't just fill with water, it redesigned itself while it sank. And in that redesign, some passages became barriers, and some doors became physical borders. After holding on for so long, the structure reaches a point where steel can't keep up with weight and angle. The bow drags down, the stern rises, and the ship begins to act like a massive lever, concentrating stress at midship. Inside, that means doors jamming, panels breaking loose, vibration traveling through entire corridors, like the ship is groaning in pain. No drama, just mechanics. And then comes the event that changes everything, the break. Not a clean cut, a rupture under load with water and metal giving way together. From that moment on, each section follows its own path, and any isolated chamber becomes truly isolated. With the bow already gone, the stern holds for a short time in an unstable posture, like it's trying to regain balance, but it's damaged, flooding, and systems are failing in a cascade. Whatever light remains disappears, and the sound turns into a mix of wind, water, and a structure moaning under stress. When the stern finally starts going down for real, it drops fast enough to drag turbulence and debris, leaving a trail of bubbles and suspended particles. It's a moment you understand more through physics than sight. Mass, gravity, and water winning. The surface closes again, and only darkness remains. On the seafloor, there's no such thing as total silence, but there is a silence that feels bigger than you. The bow rests like a broken monument. The stern, separated, becomes a snarled knot of twisted steel. Between them, a debris field holds objects half buried, half exposed, like time is always halfway through covering everything. And then you catch the detail that hooks you, a dead end formed by collapse, and the outline of an entrance where the frame is still visible. That doesn't prove what's inside, but it proves something stayed separate. And at this depth, separation is a time capsule, fragile, hard to reach, and easy to destroy. Titanic didn't freeze like a museum. It's changing constantly. Steel is eaten by biological and chemical processes, corrosion builds delicate structures, and every decade reshapes what still stands. Places that were corridors become openings, ceilings become floors, and what looked solid on one expedition can be gone on the next. That's why when a frame or door still appears defined, it matters. Not because of mysticism, because of improbability. Time doesn't preserve out of kindness. It preserves by accident and geometry, and that accident is what science tries to capture before it disappears. When the robot descends again, the goal isn't to open, it's to confirm with method, constant standoff distance, lateral passes, scale reference, and as little disturbance of silt as possible. The operational question is straightforward. Is this truly a dead end with no access? Or is there an alternate route the camera missed? The light shows the same pattern again. Collapse forming a barrier, a partially protected frame, and a seam you can still read on the corroded surface. That doesn't tell you what's on the other side, but it tells you the other side is still separate from the rest of the ship. And for archaeology, that kind of separation is valuable, as long as nobody ruins it trying to prove it fast. This is where the mind wants to finish the story, and where exaggeration gets the most oxygen. The most plausible answer on a ship this large is functional. A reorganized storage room, a technical space, a service locker, an area that changed purpose near the maiden voyage. It could also involve ordinary onboard items, hardware, crates, personal effects thrown by chaos, without needing any secret to be meaningful. The twist, if you can call it that, is the door becomes a limit of evidence. We can see the edge, the fit, the surrounding collapse, but we can't see the interior safely, and that forces an adult posture, working with hypotheses and probability, not certainty and spectacle. There's a contrast that always hits. Up top, on the surface, a modern ship with lights and engines. Down below, a world where one wrong thruster blast turns history into dust. That's why "don't touch" isn't preciousness, it's technique. One contact can break rusticles, kick up silt, erase fine detail, and destroy context. And context is what turns wreckage into verifiable history. And I'll be honest, curiosity is a gift, but it becomes a problem when it demands a show. In this kind of investigation, the best outcome is often coming back with clean records, measurements, and strong imagery, and leaving the door exactly as it was, because keeping it closed might be the only way to keep it true. In the end, Titanic remains two things at once: a human catastrophe and an accidental archaeological site. That door down there doesn't need to deliver a revelation to matter. It already shows how the ship was redrawn by water, pressure, and collapse. After 113 years, what's stunning is that a physical boundary still resists our urge to know everything. Have you noticed how we always want a sealed ending, a final answer? At the bottom of the Atlantic, the ending is different. The story is recorded, but not necessarily opened, and maybe that's the most honest point of all, because sometimes respecting the limit is the most serious part of the investigation.
This video is an AI historical reconstruction based on records from the time, created for educational and narrative purposes.